guess, calling the meeting to order, and I believe we have a quorum. Do we need to take roll? Okay.
Chair Val.
Here.
Kelly Christian.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Harris.
Here.
We have quorum.
Great, thank you very much. And we have a nice full agenda to get through this evening. So first we'll have, do we do approval of the minutes first? I can never remember. So could I have a motion to approve the minutes of our September 17th meeting, please?
I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Okay, we have minutes approved. And now we're ready for public comment. So Tina Payden.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm Tina Payden, and if you don't know, I'm a local landlord that provides affordable housing here in Evanston for actually over 100 years. Soon, I'm already a minority, not just that I'm a Black female, but that I provide affordable units. Here in Evanston, luxury housing seems to be the priority. Even though you say affordable housing is important, everyone's action shows differently, because when I want help, I can't get help, but restaurants get help, retail space gets help, developers get higher and taller buildings, and then they give you 5 or 10 units, and somehow that's okay. Soon I'll be disappeared. Some of you may be happy about that. I just buried my father yesterday, and he provided affordable units for over 50 years. I don't know if some of you read some articles, but in Rogers Park last week or the week before, they evicted the whole building because a large developer came in and said they wanted to remodel. Those people will not return, just like Cabrini Green or Robert Taylor Homes. How many of those people that were evicted from those buildings are in the luxury units that they have right now? I bet 0. So that's what's going to happen right here if you don't help somebody like me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for your loss, Betty. All right, then let's move on to our Green Homes pilot update.
Hi. So we have Kara Pratt and Shavion Scott that are coming to provide an update on the Green Home pilot.
Great, okay. Welcome.
Thank you. There we go. All right. Thank you all for having me. I am Shavion Scott. I serve as the Managing Director of Urban Resilience at the Center for Neighborhood Technology, one of the team members for the collaboration that we currently have with the City of Evanston, as well as Center for Neighborhood Technology and Elevate Energy, or Elevate. You may have received updates in the past from my colleague, Bob Dean, but we've got a new team that's at the helm of this project. So I wanted to take a moment to just reintroduce them. They were not able to make it tonight, but you'll see more and more with different opportunities to engage with residents, building owners on the grounds, even through contractor outreach. You'll see more and more of them in the area as well. But Ryan Scherzinger, he serves as the project manager and our internal lead on the CNT side. Lindsay Wade is a senior associate with Elevate on the public sector programs. Dara Reif is the associate director. Maya Coyle is the project manager. specifically specializing in high performance buildings. Bill Lyons is a senior engineer too, who is at the helm of our construction activities and retrofit preparation. And then Michael Gatto is a new addition to the team as well, who will be the construction manager, specifically looking at building electrification. And thinking about just kind of the partner roles and responsibilities, you may have noticed if you've been following this program, Evanston Development Cooperative had to step away for organizational reasons. And so in that time, Elevate has essentially taken on the responsibilities that EDC once held. And thinking about just kind of how things are proportioned across the team, CNT has a primary responsibility of serving as an administrative manager. We're going to be a main point of contact with the city. We're going to manage overall budget and administration. We convene with the advisory group. We coordinated focus groups a lot last year in collaboration with partners on the ground, supported program design, and prepared recommendations for scaling. Those will be ongoing and iterative activities just to make sure that we can ensure success. As you can see, program coordinator does a lot with the day-to-day management, overall documenting and guidance around like how we do this project well. As we think about the intake process and how the team may engage or interface with residents, again, contractors, building owners, to increase awareness and recruit them to the program where they can benefit. The program coordinator responsibilities do anchor those activities. As we're thinking about construction management, again, anything that's going into the building assessment and retrofit process, and of course, bringing these projects from start to finish, in addition to quality assurance and quality control, that also falls into this category. And then finally, just the energy manager, again, Elevate Energy, thinking about the overall energy and cost savings that a lot of these retrofits are meant to be responsive to. They'll be taking the lead on that as well. This started as just kind of generally a one-stop shop program model. It's now formally known as the Evanston Green Homes pilot program. Again, thinking about the origins, this initiative came out of a study that was conducted by CNT in the city to really think about climate resilient, affordable housing. The program is meant to achieve both equity and climate goals. So again, thinking about the existing culture of the community, the existing population, and of course, acknowledging the condition of the existing housing stock, we want to make sure we're very intentional about the equity and climate goals. The current pilot is funded by $1 million investment through the federal, state, and local fiscal recovery funds, and again, has a specific focus on affordable housing. And with that, thinking about the climate and energy goals, climate and equity goals, we've identified a number of improvements that seem very reasonable and feasible for the program period. Those can include new electrical systems, ensuring we can enhance insulation and ventilation, remediating lead and asbestos, upgrading to energy efficient appliances, and providing referrals for solar programs and lead service line replacement initiatives where those may fall outside of the current priorities of the pilot. You can see from the diagram, again, just how these enhancements might look once retrofitted to a particular building. And again, we're looking at single family homes, multifamily buildings to get a good mix of retrofits and insights from that. Right now, again, in thinking about the pilot and making sure we start with some smaller geographies to ensure success, we have been intentional about focusing on the areas where the most existing affordable housing is, and also where we have the highest vulnerability to climate change impacts. So you'll see from the map there, Fifth Ward, portions of the Fifth Ward and Eighth Ward were identified for this initial pilot. I guess you could say southwest of Green Bay Road, north of Church Street, and south of McCormick Boulevard on the Fifth Ward, and then for the Eighth Ward between Ridge and Oakton Street. What we are finding with this program as we continue to just kind of identify participants and those eligible for the program is there are a number of people who are falling just outside of the boundaries that we have here that are eligible. But again, because they're outside of the boundaries, we're thinking about making sure that we document and keep up with them for program expansion. And thinking about our overall goals, again, we're looking to identify more resources to expand the program. Again, starting with the smaller geographies will allow us to really identify both successes and challenges, even where we are thinking about the level of investment for the different building types. That's going to help to inform how much in additional resources we might need to garner to continue to expand in the way that can be meaningful and impactful. We also are intentional about just a human-centered design to structure the participant engagement in the program. Again, thinking about how do we meet people where they are, showing up at meetings that are already, in session, making sure we attend ward nights. If it's tabling in a supermarket or department store, the team is open to doing all of that to make sure we reach those who can benefit the most from this program. And thinking about our metrics, we're looking to serve approximately 50 housing units in approximately 14 buildings of various types. Looking at privately owned to make sure we're able to work directly with the building owners and expedite the process given the confines of us successfully completing the program by the end of 2025. We're looking to achieve both energy and cost savings in the units served, again, and thinking about the different building types and the level of investment that each one may require. Some may require only $15,000 in retrofits. Others may be 25. Others we may find requires a greater investment than that. But just kind of being mindful of that, we want to make sure we are able to pinpoint the exact percentages of cost and energy savings given that variety. We're also continuing to identify additional funding sources to leverage from the initial $1 million investment. We have received dollars from Department of Energy through the Buildings Up Prize. That was in the amount of about $400,000. We also have a recent investment that I'll talk about a little bit later that gets us on our way to about $1 million match. But we are going to look to identify sources that take us well to and above that where possible. And then finally, we want to make sure that we preserve affordability and avoid displacement. Again, this pilot is really meant to identify and connect with existing residents to make sure that the existing housing stock can keep up with the times and the changes that we're seeing based on environmental factors due to climate change. Current status, again, we transitioned project implementation from EDC to Elevate, so they're taking on a large part of the implementation role, and again, CNT is on the administrative side. We did a soft launch of the program and have seen tremendous interest from several eligible residents. We're actually seeing a large influx of single-family and smaller multifamily units that are expressing interest and also eligible now. The team has completed 9 building assessments and 19 unit assessments, which again has us well on our way toward our goal of 50 units and 14 buildings. We've also identified 26 eligible buildings and 39 eligible units through the application process. So again, identifying those and making sure that we're able to still preserve a good mix of properties, which you'll see in a later chart. That'll give you some more perspective on where we're seeing interest and eligibility line up. And then thinking about funding and leveraging that resource to expand the program, we continue to look for, identify, and go after different grant proposals to increase the size and length of the pilot. You can see from this chart here just kind of where things are based on some of the numbers that I mentioned already. So, and thinking about both the building assessment process and the applications that we're receiving from interested and eligible residents. Current buildings assessed, we've got a lot of interest on the single family housing side. And then you'll next see kind of 2 flats and 3 flats, 4 flats. We are looking to identify opportunities to really engage with those in the 5+ and 20+ multifamily unit buildings. So we'll be looking to you all and certainly looking to take advantage of any in-person or other engagement opportunities to increase awareness to meet those targets as well. And thinking about scaling, again, that goes back to the resources available to do so. So some things that are already secured or managed by the city, you can see here, federal earmark for solar installation, lead service line replacement, energy efficiency and conservation block grants, community development block grants, and then one of our newer wins has been the Northwestern University Good Neighbor Fund. So assisting us toward that $1 million match goal at $300,000 itself. And thinking about managed opportunities by other governments, IDA, the Home Repair and Accessibility Program, ComEd's electrification program, Solar for All, and the CETA weatherization program all align very much with the goals of this particular pilot. And then applications in progress, the EPA Environmental Justice Government to Government grants, the federal earmark for one-stop shop support, again, perfectly suited for what we're trying to do here. And then we're going to continue to explore our eligibility to apply again to another round of Buildings Up prize funding. So those are all on our radar, and we hope to have updates on those very soon. And thinking about just closing out this year, this final quarter, the Elevate team will continue to do home assessments and improvements. We're going to partner with them to do some additional resident outreach and engagement. Again, meeting folks where they are, whether web, print, or in person. We'll look to do all of that while the weather cooperates with us. We will be developing, translating, and distributing communication and marketing materials that support program recruitment. Again, we're seeing a lot of interest in the building types that are single family and small multifamily, but we really need to get more interest and awareness out to those in the 5+ and 20+ multifamily buildings. Contractor outreach and recruitment so that they are very much prepped and ready for the construction season next year, and to complete all of the retrofits by the end of 2025. We are well on our way in mapping out the plan to engage with them as well. And then re-engaging the advisory group and community partners. They have been instrumental in just thinking about the program design, thinking about the target areas, and we want to be mindful of the additional insights that they bring with their lived experience as well. And then finally, we'll continue to seek additional funding opportunities, again, to scale the program. We continue to get interest from those that, like I said, fall just outside of the boundaries. And so where we can pull them back in through an expansion, we really, really want to do that. All right, that's it. I will stick around. Thank you.
Yeah. I think we probably have some questions, or Kara, are you going to? Okay. Ugo, you have a question?
And forgive me, I didn't write down your name. My apologies for that.
No worries.
But I have a couple of questions. One is that you mentioned the word equity at the beginning of the presentation. Can you give us a little bit more on that subject? How is it that your program will enhance the equity growth of families that are being using or taking advantage of the program?
Yeah, so I would say a big part of that goes back to the initial program design, where we were thinking about identifying where the areas where, again, that existing affordable housing is. And then, again, knowing that the 5th and 8th wards has a predominantly Black and Latinx community, really being intentional about making sure all of those things align, and pretty much designing the program around those two critical factors, both the existence of affordable housing, the income implications for that, and also making sure that vulnerable populations and those most vulnerable to the climate conditions that we're seeing are identified and recognized, and we start there.
So my follow-up question to that is, so is one of the qualifications to be affordable housing today? And if that is one of the qualifications, what else do they make them qualify to be part of this pilot program?
Sure. So we are assessing buildings that are existing affordable housing and putting measures in place to make sure that current building owners are willing to commit to affordable housing in the long term. So this would certainly help to contribute to the anti-displacement measures that we're looking to achieve through this as well. But generally speaking, there are income eligibility requirements. I didn't include that chart, but they are laid out on our program website for just kind of, again, the number of family members to a household, and then what those thresholds are. But we are essentially keeping all of those things in mind locationally, income-wise, and certainly thinking about the specific buildings that we're able to identify. What are the existing conditions when it comes to qualification?
Since most of the buildings that you're looking at and you have already assessed are owner occupied, are those qualifications then only to the occupant to the owner occupant, or are they also need to be passed on to the tenants, since there are some multi-unit buildings in your program?
Yeah, so we have actually looked to identify both. We want to make sure where there are owner-occupied buildings that they meet certain income requirements and thresholds, but we're also looking at tenants as well. Usually when you have owners who manage multiple buildings, they may fall outside of and above the income limitations that we typically would employ. And so then we look at tenants, especially where they are being intentional about offering affordable housing to the most vulnerable populations.
I had another question, but I lost it.
Okay.
Thank you. I was trying to pay attention
If it
to what
comes
you were
back.
saying. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I had a really good meeting with your team a few weeks back, and I just got an email a few days ago saying we'll soon have translated materials in Spanish, which I think is really important as we continue outreach. And I had one question about kind of the workforce. There's an interesting workforce development opportunity for local contractors. Could you maybe give a deeper update about how the contractor outreach is going and what that's looking like?
Sure. So I will say again, the Elevate team is more hands-on with this portion, but just thinking about contractor outreach and engagement, we're working with the city to see if there are contractors that they worked with in the past, obviously, just to understand who's already within the Evanston footprint. We want that to certainly be a first source when we think about live, work, play, where contractors have an opportunity to enhance the community that they reside within. That's always a plus. In addition to that, we're identifying just different directories from surrounding communities, whether we are thinking about MW, DBE, veteran, and other business enterprises, where there are already kind of pre-curated directories that we can utilize. We're looking at that as well. And outside of that, even though EDC had stepped away, they were a connection point for some contractors that they've worked with in the past. So they continue to be a resource for us. And we are kind of doing an all-call where we may not have others identified to make sure we get the right folks on the project.
Great. Thank you.
Ugo.
Yes.
And I added one more. The one I added is in regards to the contractors that you have are looking for. Is there any preference to contractors that are based in Evanston? Since this is an Evanston program, are you contemplating that at all in your outlook for these contractors?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely a priority. We aren't, what's the word? I was going to say. So we are looking at Evanston as being a first source. So making sure that the project timeline and then, of course, their capacity aligns with the project needs, that's going to be high on our list. But I would say, yeah, it's the top of our list.
Great.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
to know. The question I had before is in regards to something that you mentioned, that you're looking for a commitment from the landlords who use this pilot program to enhance their property to commit to maintain the affordability to their buildings. Are there any guidelines set yet as to what are those wishes from the program to that continuity of affordable housing from that particular owner?
Sure, and I'll see. Did you want to speak to that at all? Okay. So I will say, and again, Elevate is working more closely with those building owners and having those direct communications. But we've established different, just kind of program standards by way of our operations guide and our three-party agreement to make sure that there is an understanding on the front end before building owners commit to the program, that they are able to commit, whether it's short-term, long-term. I'll have to go back to the team to see if we put a minimum number of years requirement in there. But generally speaking, we want to go into the project knowing that the owners themselves have a commitment that will allow us to see results from the investment in retrofits that are made.
Excuse- Carrie, yours are okay. I have just one quick question. So basically, most of the work that's been done thus far are assessments, but and has some of the work, the retrofit work, begun, or is that more really coming next year?
It's more on the horizon.
Right,
Yes.
yeah.
So we're using a lot of the time right now to really lean into the resident engagement and outreach, making sure they're aware of the program. If right now we are missing them, I know we've had an opportunity to work with some of your council members already just to get an audience with them so that they understand the different program parameters and guidelines. And just kind of thinking about contractor outreach and engagement. We want to make sure, again, we get the right folks involved with the program so that we can, in fact, meet that 2025 deadline to bring these all to fruition. So, again, the success of this program will allow us to really lean into how do we expand, how do we do that well, and what additional dollars can we garner to do that.
Great, yeah, thank you. So we need a motion to accept this update and place it on file.
I move the approval and putting on file of the report.
In a second,
Second?
okay.
And Chair, if I could use this time to just ask one quick question.
Sure, go right
I just
ahead.
wanted to make sure I understood the goals. Do we have goals around amount of units or buildings or both?
Yes, both. So we're looking at 50 units.
2 units?
And across 14 buildings minimum. We've already identified more than that. We just want to make sure that we are maintaining a good mix so that we get good insights on not only single family and 2 and 4 flats, but also 5+ unit and 20+ unit multifamilies as well. But 50 units total is the goal.
50 eligible units is the goal, and then just a good mix between single family, 2 flats, 5+, et cetera. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, great. Can we just, do we do a roll call on our vote, on our motion there?
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
Chloe Thurston,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming. We look forward
course.
to the next update and hearing about some of, how the actual work is going. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you. Okay. So next, we're ready to have a update or a report on our CPAH waitlist, and yes. Okay, Marion, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Marion Johnson, Housing and Grants Supervisor. I'm going to go very quickly over the report that was in the packet, and then we have Amy Kaufman from Community Partners for Affordable Housing here to answer any questions. So this is our annual inclusionary housing waitlist report, where you get an update on the status of where the waitlist is at. Highlights for this round is that the team at CPAH has done a great job at increasing the awareness of the program, and as a result, we have a higher number of people sign up for the waitlist, which is great when it comes time to lease units, so we can make sure we have a good mix of people that are eligible and can be contacted. Particularly of interest is the fact that they didn't just increase the number the outreach resulting in a higher number of people on the wait list. But we have more people on the wait list that would be eligible, have income that are eligible for the units. And that's especially important because on the second chart in the report, you can see how the households are split by income. And historically, we had a good chunk of that was below 50% AMI, which is not necessarily incomes that would allow to access IHO unit. This time around, we're already seeing that 40% of the income of the households could have incomes that are eligible for IHO units. So that's nice to see that we have a more robust wait list to work from when we're trying to lease units, even though we'd like to make sure that everybody is housed. The other item that we're seeing right now is that we are seeing, something to note is that we often see the waitlist queuing towards smaller households. This does not mean that we don't have a need for a larger unit or that larger households do not need affordable housing. It just tends to skew that way because of the type of unit that are available through this program currently. So that's something to note. The numbers don't reflect necessarily the actual demand out there. And then as part of this year's accomplishment, a full update of the annual update of the waitlist was completed. So these are current number of where we're looking for. Another item to note is that compared to previous years, the last chart around kind of units in the pipeline is very, very low. We had a little bit of a lull as far as development application last year. That's likely going to result in fairly big pause in 2025. Currently, we only have 4 units that have been approved. The one for sale and 3 other units in the project. However, this is likely going to give us some time to do massive outreach in the next year because we are working on a lot of much larger development than we've seen before with much larger number of IHO units. We expect 2026 could very likely double or more the number of units that we have in this program. So we definitely need to gear up for that because that could be a lot of units all at once. And with that, I will leave Amy to answer any of your questions.
Yep. Yeah, council, committee members?
That last point that was made, I missed the beginning of it, Marion. I don't know if you can reiterate that. You said there had been a pause.
So usually in previous year, we've had quite a few units in the pipeline coming up. Right now, we don't have that many that are fully approved. We only have 4. That's quite low. We just didn't have many applications that are going to hit in 25. But we do have a lot of projects that are in the works that have very many units, particularly because they're working towards the 20% of affordable units because of the state incentive. So not only we're seeing larger projects, but they're also coming to us with potentially a higher number of units.
And then how many vacancies currently do we have?
There are, if you want, it depends how you define vacancy, but right now there's 6 units that all of them have applicants pending.
Okay.
So they've gotten through the qualification for the program and the unit process, and we're waiting to hear from the property manager. So I think 3 are new leases and 3 are turnovers. So hopefully we won't have any shortly, although this is the way this happens today. We got word of a turnover at one of the buildings that
Okay.
will then become a vacant unit when it's ready in 6 weeks or so.
But
So
we have applications in for all the quote vacant.
we have
unquote.
qualified applicants.
Okay, qualified
Yeah.
applicants for all those.
So
That's
we've
great.
completed the marketing, we've vetted the income, et cetera, and referred those applicants to the property manager. At that point, the property manager does their own screening, and they then decide whether or not to offer a lease.
Okay. And then are we also tracking, and maybe we don't have a lot of examples like this, but I think in Tapestry they have affordable units that they're self-managing.
Yeah,
Are we tracking those at all as well?
we're really not. That
Okay.
We only became aware of it fairly recently, that there was this whole other lane of units there.
Yeah.
And it's something that, we've talked about with city staff, but as of now, we don't have access to any of that information.
Okay.
Right. So CPAH is really contracted to manage the waitlist for the IHO program, we are aware of those units, although not always at the get-go, but now more and more as they come with applications through the state program. We don't have any oversight on those units, so we know about them, but they have slightly different rules.
Yeah.
Our program is a little bit, is very slightly different.
Yeah. Okay. And then last thing, it would help in the margin maybe if we could call attention to some of the things that you plan to discuss today. So, for example, maybe there's a call out of 50% are between, 51% and 100% AMI, but just having like some snapshots in the margins next time, some things that you want to kind of call our attention to, as opposed to having to kind of interpret and decide. I mean, we're going to do that anyway, but it would be nice to have I gave one example, but just something in the margin that says, hey, out of all this information, one of the things we want to direct your attention to is 50% of the people who had applied are between 1% and 100% AMI.
Yeah, I can
right?
certainly do
something
that.
like
When
that.
I
Yeah.
update the spreadsheet, I can certainly do that and then pass it along to Uri and Marion, and they can decide what points they want
Exactly,
to make to
yeah.
pass along to the council. Yeah, we can
Exactly,
definitely
yeah,
do
just-
that.
just-
It is
so-
a lot. It's a lot.
And this
of
is good.
information.
We'll go through it, but I think that's helpful to even help us think about how to understand this document and what questions we might want to
Yeah.
ask. So if you have like two to four things that you want to call our attention to, I think that'd be beneficial.
Can I mention one right
Yeah,
now?
absolutely.
One of the things that's been sort of an interesting development has been on some of those lower AMIs. Some of these units have actually been able to serve that population because we've had more and more clients coming with social service agency subsidies, not housing vouchers. We've always had the housing vouchers, but Lutheran services, social worker who calls and says, hey, I have a client, we're going to pay their rent for 18 months. And, that allows servicing of people with much lower incomes. And
Yep.
that's been a good match. I think
great.
that helps to service that population that we talk about so much that's at the lower income levels.
Member
That's all-
Burns, I
yeah.
just want to, so there's a summary narrative at the bottom that highlighted some of it, but not all of it. So
Okay.
I'm hearing that I might just do a little bit formatting and then add some of the comments that I mentioned during the meeting.
Yeah. Okay. That'd be great. Thank you. And thanks for calling that out too.
Other questions from the committee? Well, I'm intrigued by this comment about tapestry. I guess I just naively assumed that when they go through a development process and they agree to providing the required number or more units, that they were then part of our grand plan here.
So there's the difference of definition between an IHO unit, which is a requirement from the IHO, from the actual city ordinance. There's the unit they come in with as public benefit, which may be above and beyond the IHO requirement, but are part of their application for the development. And then outside of that, they may have units that help them, that are affordable and help them qualify for the state tax incentive, but that they didn't include as public benefit. So I don't know if you want to mention anything else, but essentially we have those kind of three categories.
So
and
some of their units are in the IHO program and some of them are not.
exactly.
Oh my gosh, how complicated.
Yeah, so we have basically three different classification of units, and that's some of the conversation we've had with Ori as he was working on the IHO and the new state tax incentive and the slight differences in how they handle their program essentially.
Right, yeah. Chloe?
But those the IHO units, the 12 that are in the program that are Evanston's IHO program, those use the waiting list and come
Right.
through the program.
Right.
The other units do not. They are administered by their property manager.
And they have some way of recruiting eligible tenants. Okay.
I think it's, I don't know, I shouldn't
Sure.
say this at a public meeting. I'm guessing it's more akin to the way the ARO program is set up in Chicago, but I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Chloe?
Do we know the total number of differently defined affordable units in these types of buildings in the city that aren't just the IHO ones, but like the sort of tapestry state tax incentive ones? Do we have any idea, or is it just known entity.
Hello, Uri Pachter, Senior Housing Planner. We're working with the assessor's office at Cook County to sort of navigate the dynamics of their program supports a lot of our goals, but when developers work on this type of initiative and have units that are outside of our program, we don't have jurisdiction or control. But there is data that's available either publicly or that we can sort of partner as a jurisdiction to get from them. We're also looking at, as we update our IHO, it goes into in effect, we were talking about Q2 of next year. We have some time to update our policies and procedures along with that and figure out how we can incorporate this in so that we're knowledgeable of what's going on, but also not going beyond our role in other private developments.
Maybe this is for the IHO discussion, but so if we increase the sort of percentage, do some of the units that were kind of developed through these other programs then get in the future sort of end up sort of within the jurisdiction of all right? Okay, so they'll still be kind of separate even though.
Yeah, so each building was approved under a specific IHO.
Yeah.
A change from 10 to 15% as an example would mean that out of the 20% of affordable units that they have, more would be IHO units,
Okay.
essentially.
Okay, interesting. Thanks.
Great. Any more? Yes.
I was just going to say, and the reason why I brought it up is even if we're not, we don't have any kind of authority or we're not directly regulating them, it might be helpful to still track them and to provide that information in this report as kind of a set aside thing. I don't know.
So that might be more of an IHO report versus a CPAH waitlist report.
Okay.
But
that
we
works.
can absolutely, and I know Uri's.
Yeah, I was going to add we're planning on doing. I know they're very similar, but we're planning on doing an annual IHO report, which would overlap and we'd coordinate with SEPA, but that would be a great place to include that where we have learnings that are sort of beyond the contract and the specifics of the work that SEPA does with the city.
That works. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, thank you, Amy.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And then we have also a report from the Metropolitan Tenants Organization.
And Chair, so I don't forget, I text somebody from Elevate, Lindsay Wade. She said it's 5 years if someone accepts funding through the Green Homes program, that the units have to remain affordable for 5 years, is what she said.
Okay. Yeah, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we use
Somebody
the same.
had that question.
I think we use the same requirement as the home program.
Yeah.
Hi again. So I'm providing a quick update on Metropolitan Tenants Organization Landlord Tenant Hotline Service Report, going over the report that was in the packet. So we're seeing that from January through September, we had about 211 calls received, and 64 of those were received through Evanston 311. We did get 22 of them through the new text for help feature that was implemented last year. And we're seeing similar themes around the top categories of question, leases and maintenance being the top two. Eviction and early termination has seen quite a bit drop compared to previous years. So we're kind of back to pre-COVID kind of trends, essentially. Vast majority of the calls are still from tenants, about 93%. And you will notice at the bottom, we had added last year a time to respond tracker. Now the platform the 311 platform was updated and changed to a different vendor, we are not able to run the exact same type of report as we used to due to the way the platform is set up. So now we have a slightly different number, which is day to resolve. So the number is slightly different, and that's why you're seeing the 3 days instead of the less than 2 days of response, because we're talking about resolution and not first contact, essentially. We also have the highlights of the satisfaction survey that was sent by MTO. I want to point out that a few things here. The survey was sent by MTO through email. They got about 20 responses, so the percentager include 20 responses. So it's worth noting for some of the comments. About 80% of the respondents were received the information that they were looking for, or were still conversation was ongoing to get their request fulfilled. And then we have about 80% of the respondents that are very likely to neutral to recommend MTO to somebody else. And then we've got about 40% that came to contact MTO through Evanston 311. With that, I can leave John Bartlett from Metropolitan Tenants Organization to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
How's everyone?
Yeah. Oh, Councilmember Harakaris?
Yeah, I just have one question. So, as in my position, I sometimes get calls from residents that I refer to MTO. I can think, in the last couple of days I had one. I don't see the patterns myself and like how often these things are happening. I know we've discussed in the past if there would be a way to get information by ward. I know we can't, for some reason, for many reasons, we, addresses and things, but I think it'd be helpful for me to be able to see if issues are trending up or down, because it's kind of hard to parse that on my side of things. So I know that's a difficult question, but I'm just curious.
We do track things by address, and actually I have a volunteer that can actually put things in words, and I will get that. Yeah, I've kind of, in fact, I asked the person in the program, say, oh, can you do that? And so I'll send out the map when we get it.
That's really great. Thank you.
Okay. Ugo, do you want to go ahead?
Hello,
Hi.
good evening. Couple of questions. One is the number of surveys responded to is about 20, we were told. About how many you sent? 211 to each one of the callers, or?
I would have said it was about 100 and a little over 100, because we sent it out in, I believe, July.
Okay, so
June,
it's
July.
better than
So,
normal response to a survey. It's about 20%, which
Yes.
normally is like 3%, I think. So that's great. Wanted to ask you if there is a possibility to, I see that the second largest item of complaints is on maintenance, and maintenance could be something significant that it should be flagged to the city, or it could be something irrelevant as they are not picking up the advertising newspapers that they're throwing on the front lawn. So it could be anything. Is there any way for your organization to distinguish what is important and what isn't? What is just a complaint?
I suppose we could kind of.
Well, is it relevant to do? I don't
Yes.
know, but I think that it could be.
Yes, though I would say that we don't really get any calls about, really irrelevant things. That they're certainly less serious and more serious. There could be leaks and floods versus just, somebody that has a like a cracked window, I mean, all these things need to be taken care of, but I would say some of them are definitely more serious. There's no heat, but I think actually there's no heat, but anyway, there could be, and then, sometimes it's also hard for us to distinguish, like you get around pests. Is it a serious pest problem? But then it's all, without us going out to actually investigate, you're taking the tenant's kind of assessment of it, and most of them are, if they're calling us, they're assessing it as this is important, or and it's more of a crisis. So
I see that you track the days of resolution to issues. So there is a call back to see if the problem has been resolved or not from MTO.
I would say
or
the
how do you get
resolution
that?
is more is, did they follow our advice? Yeah, because the actual resolution could take longer, but what we track is, for instance, if they have a repair issue and they need to write a letter to the landlord, did they write that letter to the landlord and all that? That's how we track resolution.
Also, we really don't know if they
We-
resolved the issue.
I can't tell you exactly
Yeah,
all the time
okay.
if it's completely resolved. No.
Councilmember Burns?
Yeah, so picking up on that, when it says average days to resolve 301 requests, 3.1, so that's advice was given, advice was followed within that time frame?
Yes,
or
it
is that-
oftentimes means that sometimes people will send us back the letter to say, is this letter okay? And then we'll go, yes, no, or we'll make some suggestions to them, like, here's what you should put in the letter so that or how to document things a little better. Because oftentimes that's one of the issues that we find regularly with renters, is that they're not really documenting their problems well. They're just, oh, we have a leak. Well, can you get a picture? Can you just, just to describe things a little bit better, and then make sure that they're writing things and all that. Because oftentimes all they do is call, and that's not.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this yet. I think as a first step, it'd be helpful to talk to our property standards team to see how when they determine an issue is resolved, just to make sure that we're at least aligning this program with our property standards program, especially for maintenance issues. So I think that's one thought. I'm happy to see the survey. This is something that we discussed early on in this term, and I think it's trying to find it again now, but I think it's good information. Is there? We discussed text. I know people would have to opt into it, and so I don't necessarily need a response today. But if we can at least figure out how we can. Or let me ask, were these sent out through text or email? I thought I heard email. Was it email, the survey? The
email,
satisfaction
yes.
survey?
That was sent out via email.
Yeah, if we could think about how we could send them out through text. And if we can't for whatever reason, I'd like to know that at the next meeting. And if we can, I'd like to know how, because I mentioned this probably the last time, that texts have like a 90-something% open rate. So if we got 20 out of 100 and something to send an email, we get a lot more information if we're sent through text. And if all we're sending is these 3 questions, I think that's something that people will probably do over a text if it's just like 3 or 4 questions. So I'd like to pick back up on that at the next meeting.
I can talk to everybody about that and figure out. I think there's both good and bad parts to emails versus phone numbers.
Yeah.
That change all the time.
And then it says mediation cases. I think I see 0. What is that? What is mediation cases?
The mediation means that if we end up mediating and we didn't have any this time.
And
we've been negotiating that, which we didn't put down was, with the we have a attorney on staff now that does do some mediation and around eviction stuff prior to the actual court stuff, trying to do pre-litigation because we found that that tends to be more successful in keeping people actually in their units or without anything on their record than waiting to actually go through the eviction process, because those oftentimes just ends up with problems. And it's kind of also just an issue, though, with the way that the state's now running the whole eviction court, that if you want to get rental assistance, you have to go to eviction court.
So you would describe mediation as like pre-eviction hearing mediation?
I would generally no. How we've defined it here is if the landlord and the tenant actually sit down and mediate together, where they're
At any point, whether
Yeah.
an eviction has been filed or not.
well, if they're actually in a setting where there's a mediation taking place where they're both in the same
in
room,
the same
they're
place,
talking,
same
yes.
time. Okay.
And
yeah.
and so we've not been doing that. Usually things can get settled by if it's with the attorney staff person, then he'll call the landlord up and they'll make an offer, then get back and do more of a shuttle diplomacy, which is I think not really what mediation is.
Okay.
That's not how I would define it.
I think that's it for now.
Okay.
Thank
and, Councilmember Harakaris?
I just want to thank you and your organization for the work you all do for the residents. At least the ones that I've referred to, it's really, they've kind of been at their wit's end, and, they come, to me seeking answers. It's like, and most of the time it's like, this is a really tough problem. And I'm like, luckily we have someone who's can help you sort this out. And I know, it's been very helpful for people and giving them like really good guidance. So just want to thank you.
Well, thank you. And we try to help everybody, though. That's the other thing, is that, that things aren't, the laws aren't always favorable, and some people end up in trouble. And, there's not really anything that can be done.
Right. Councilmember Burns?
Also wanted to point out, I reached out to Jonah Karsh, who works for MTO, I believe, and I was working with someone who is someone that likes to handle his business in person as opposed to over the phone, and so he ended up going to the South Loop where MTO is headquartered to speak to somebody in person, which they were happy to help. But from that experience, I talked to Jonah, and Jonah talked to John about having office hours at some point in Evanston, which we've been working out with the city manager. So I don't know if we've finalized anything. I know we had a couple dates or second and fourth Mondays of the month from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. and then 11:30 to 1:30 on the third Friday of the month. I don't think any of that is finalized, so probably not write about that just yet. But I think we're gonna figure something out. So that's a great update.
Yeah, I think we were going to pilot that because when we originally started doing that, when we first started having the contract, and there would be days when we'd have staff people just sitting
around,
either at the library, nobody would come in, or people would sign up to come in and then they wouldn't come in. So I think that, we're willing to try, piloting again, but that we also, don't want to guarantee that that's going to be a long-term thing, but just because it's, it needs to be used
For sure. And I recommended it because Jonah brought up the library, doing it at City Hall. And so I checked with Manager Stowe about that. He said that we could find some space here, but also at 909 after the operation is relocated there. And then obviously the city will do our part to reach out and let folks know as well. And then also just letting 311 know. I'm happy to see that I think over 41% of the referrals are coming from 311. So also just training them so they know to let people know, hey, they also have some open office days where you can pop in and talk to somebody face to face. So.
And if I may, Councilmember Burns, our team can handle kind of putting pilot together with MTO and figure out how that would work. I would suggest, I understand you had worked on Civic Center. We usually have shied away from having those conversations happen in the Civic Center because that's a building that can be sometimes a little bit formal and intimidating for people that are talking about very personal situation. And historically, John and his organization have found that a more neutral building like a library might be a little bit more welcoming. So we could work on different location to make sure that it's still very accessible. I would second, though, that we would, if any pilot is put in place together, we would want to make sure that we have a tracking system to make sure that his team is seeing the response that we're hoping for such a pilot.
Yeah,
because it's obviously a cost.
I think, I think location is critical. I'm not sure even the Civic Center, honestly, is the best place. I just think it's better than the library, just so it seems more official and connected to the city. But it's probably best if it's just to make it as easy and unintimidating as possible for somebody to be there. You know, one room in a library, you got to get downtown, navigate all of that. Our library is not what it was before. There's a lot more activity down there. And so just something that's unintimidating, that's accessible, that's easy to get to. So yeah, maybe the Civic Center is not the best place, but I agree. Location is going to be important. So we can figure that out. Right now, Jonah is talking to Dara. That's who Manager Stowe
I'm aware.
recommended. You're aware? Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
what I was saying is our team is going to be looping that up because we're managing a contract with
whatever y'all
MTO.
come up with, I think I would.
We've been talking, trying to figure this out and what's the
Yeah,
best
that's
way
good.
to go about
That's good.
doing this.
Okay,
That's all true. Thank you.
great, okay. Well, we'll look for an update on that in the next time.
Great.
Right, okay.
We'll let you know.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. All right, so next, would someone make a motion, this is about our inclusionary housing ordinance. Would someone make a motion that we recommend to council that we repeal and replace our inclusionary housing ordinance?
I move approval to repeal and replace the inclusionary housing ordinance.
And is there a second?
A second?
Good, okay, and now we'll have some conversation. Uri, go ahead.
Sounds good. Good evening, everyone. Uri Proctor, Senior Housing Planner. We've had a lot of discussion over time throughout this process of developing a new inclusionary housing ordinance. So today I don't have a lot on my end, but I'm available for questions if anybody has any. So as a high-level reminder, from the current inclusionary housing ordinance that's currently effective, some of the main changes that the ordinance update, the proposed ordinance in the packet accomplishes are: one, increasing the minimum requirement from 10 to 15%. It's City Council goal in 2024 to increase that requirement. Increasing predictability and flexibility for developers. Increasing the variety of on-site units. We've discussed that last time in terms of number of bedrooms and the percent AMI, or generally the household income for a potential tenant. Reducing ambiguity and improving program administration, implementation, and efficacy. There are elements of the current ordinance that the way it's written is just a little hard to enforce, or there's two ways that it can be understood, and that makes it harder for the intent of the program, of the ordinance, to be implemented. And then lastly, coming back to one of the main goals of the program, to increase protections against losing Evanston's racial and economic diversity. So as a reminder, we started, at least at this committee, discussing the inclusionary housing ordinance big picture in June. We received feedback in a variety of fashions from the community and through Envision Evanston and other initiatives around housing that we incorporated, whether we were talking about the IHO formally or not. We had, I believe, 27 research conversations with a variety of local, regional, national experts, as well as developers, attorneys, and asset managers who all have some experience with the Evanston IHO, whether it was the original, past, current, etc. We discussed in our last meeting in September the draft ordinance. Since then, we reached out to housing and housing adjacent organizations, as well as everyone we spoke with for the research conversations, and any developers that have developed the IHO in the past, to make sure they were aware of what's going on, had the opportunity to provide comment. We've received a couple comments that are generally supportive to or from developers. One of them, I believe, was in the packet, formally provided public comment. Someone else emailed. They were excited about the weighted average, which is the change that we're making, where if we stay with the standard 60% AMI, if there are 2 units required, they could be 50 and 70% or 40 and 80%. They appreciated that flexibility, and that aligns well with the city being able to provide housing for folks, particularly with lower incomes, but also folks with slightly higher incomes that may not qualify as well. So today, the ordinance is available for review, and staff recommends approval to recommend to City Council, so we can stay on track and City Council can review it in November and December. As a reminder, it would not go into effect until the new zoning code, so that there aren't multiple versions. And if for some reason any of the zoning that moves forward is drastically different in some way than what we might imagine and doesn't align well with the current inclusionary housing ordinance, there'll be an opportunity to make those updates so that it is aligned with the intent today of what the committee and council is looking to achieve. A couple notes that were not discussed in detail last time, but overall everything is basically the same as it was at the last meeting. The policies and procedures, which are currently focused almost exclusively on leasing and eligibility, waitlist, much of what Amy was discussing that SEPA works on. We're looking to expand that further so that there's more specificity in that document for program execution, tracking, design, and a little less specificity in the ordinance, so that there's an ability to make changes and not have to come back to council to adapt. Let's say if the state makes a change around the tax incentives, and we can make a quick update so that we're still aligned and encouraging development. We don't have to go through that type of process. So for example, but I want to reassure that the main components, goals, requirements, enforcement is staying in the document, and it's the details that's the intent that's in the program, the policy and procedures. So anywhere, if you're looking in the draft, in the proposed ordinance that says as stipulated in policies and procedures, those are sections that would be included, in addition to other things, just for clarity's sake, to include there. I attached an outline in the packet that shows how the sections will be broken down potentially, which is aligned with the ordinance itself, so that anyone can sort of just go hand in hand. And the plan is that as we move forward to council, we'll flesh that out further so that when council's looking at it, it's not just an outline, but it's much more detailed, and there can be confidence that together we're not missing anything as the combined documents. And then finally, there were 3 changes that were made from the draft ordinance, and I wanted to highlight them here. 2 of them are fairly inconsequential. The first 2 are on pages 3 and 4. A few words were added just for clarity to make sure there wasn't any ambiguity about a calculation. See, I actually, Marion, do I grab I would read the references here, but on page 3, section 575, requirements, approved options, that section at the end, we added as calculated in a specific section. That was the addition. Want to be very clear that that change was made. It's not identical, but it's just to make sure that that's tight. The same thing on page 4, as specified in a particular section and as stipulated by the policies and procedures. We wanted to not have any loopholes and make sure it was clear. And the one area, the third one, that was a substantive change was in the for sale unit section on page 6. So basically, this section currently is stating that when a for sale inclusionary housing unit is sold, so a new development is being built, the inclusionary housing unit needs to be made available simultaneously or before the other units are made available. The previous language in the draft said sold simultaneously or before, and that doesn't take into account how long units might take to sell. And the main intent that we were trying to incorporate was that all the units, inclusionary and market rate, were made available at the same time. How long they take to sell is up to the market. They'll be priced accordingly at at least the inclusionary one at a rate that's affordable to income qualified households, and then how that process takes off. So that's the one that in our review noticed that was too strict and was not achieving that goal. So we made that change. Otherwise, all the other words documentation are identical to what was reviewed in September. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Okay, so Ugo.
Thank you. Thank you, Uri. I have a couple of questions and maybe a comment here and there, but in regards to the properties that are going to be sold on the market, and they're going to be sold at an affordable rate compared to the other units or compared to the market in general based on whatever qualifications we're imposing to the developers to sell those units. I read, correct me if I'm wrong in my assumption, but I read that this will be ad infinitum, that it will be forever an affordable housing, but it doesn't give a guideline as to at what level, at the same price that the original buyer bought it, at the same rate of the difference in the market value at the time when they bought and the price that they paid. Say regular units sell for 100, this unit sell for 75, 60, whatever it is. So this is the gap. Are we going to carry that with the market? So the homeowner that buys that original affordable housing unit also has the ability to build equity, because that's what it's all about home ownership, is to have some wealth built by your ownership of a home. A lot of issues come with that. I heard of a case of somebody who bought a townhouse in Denver on an affordable unit, and a significant number of repairs. This was a brand new condo townhouse, but there were significant flaws by the builders. And that original buyer had the need to sell that property in a lot shorter time than anticipated, because family issues came up and they had to move from Denver to another city. So they had to sell that because they couldn't carry it or rent it or whatever it was, the guidelines that they had. But they had a significant loss because they were not able to sell it at a not affordable rate, but they had put in a lot more than they could recover with that particular sell price. If they were able to sell it at a market price, they would have recovered that. So are there any provisions on this ordinance to compensate for those unexpected events that could come? And the ad infinitum term kind of went against my grain in terms of you're giving the owners of the buildings that are renting the units out, which are the ones that will make profit out of the rentals, the ability to not have to keep those affordable units over 30 years. And they still get the same benefits, supposedly. So why is it that there was a 30-year exemption for the rentals, and then is ad infinitum for the homeowners?
Sure. Okay. There are a few things there, so if
Sure,
I didn't
I'm sure.
answer
Sorry.
them all, let me know. So first, the current on both of those accounts, the current ordinance and the proposed ordinance are the same. So all of those are already in effect currently, but I'll still answer the questions.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's just to make it clear, those aren't changing. The rental affordability period is currently 30, and the for sale affordability period is in perpetuity unless a law makes that illegal.
We have the chance now.
So that's
I see.
that's the setup. So there's no change there. On the for sale side, the current ordinance includes language that specifies how the initial sale price is calculated and how future sale prices are calculated. We'll be including that in the policies and procedures. And that's a good example of our team has been working with CPAH and seeing how these types of calculations are operating, changes in interest rates, et cetera. And we've been able to make we can't currently because the ordinance doesn't allow it, it's in the ordinance, but we're planning on making like a small tweak to the calculation to better fit an affordability within there. And we can do that by having basically the city manager has to approve the policy and procedures. We have to notice for 30 days and then we can start implementing. So one will be using that model where we'll be taking more or less what's in the past calculation, and we'll just be moving that into the policies and procedures with some small changes. But basically what it does is the AMI level is locked in, to answer that question. So if it's 100% AMI, that's the contract that's made with basically with
The homeowner.
well, it depends on how the sale is done, but if it's put in the land trust, then the land trust is part of a partner on that, but the homeowner has to follow through and sell it again to the next person who fits is income qualified, or do a double transfer with the land trust and then over to the other person, but they have to follow those types of equivalent AMI. So it wouldn't switch later on if a new IHO comes out in 15 years. It wouldn't go, oh, now it's a different AMI, just like all the rental units currently are under the auspices of the previous IHOs when they signed up. That's what it impacts. This new IHO wouldn't impact current units. So that would be the same piece there. In terms of the future sales price, which was one of the questions you had,
Right.
there is a tricky balance between making sure that it's affordable for the next person and the person the household who's selling the home is able to build equity, because there's a small band in there. If they build too much equity, it's not affordable for the next person, potentially, depending on the market. So a lot of how that's calculated is if you purchase a home 30 years later, you sell that inclusionary housing unit, where's the market at? What's that price at for that 100% AMI level? And that's part of how that potential is calculated. There's also a provision currently for major repairs or system work that might increase the cost of the homeowner, and that can be factored into the calculation as well.
But there is no guideline to do that.
No, I believe in the current in the current ordinance, it stipulates what percentage it can be increased based on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. In regards to the issue of the in perpetuity, wouldn't this be the right time to address that then, if it's not a right fit today? Because it sounds very in perpetuity. That's what if I need to tear down the house and build a new house because of a tornado, because flood, whatever damage, a tree fell onto the house and we have to rebuild it. And it cost me at today's rates what I bought 10 years ago, but in perpetuity, I'm stuck. You know, that's cost that maybe it's built in, but it's taking into account all these factors that could come into play. And into play to somebody who bought it today and maybe my circumstances changed. When I bought this house at an affordable rate, my income was here because whatever happened. I had been sick or whatever, so I qualify now because I had less income, or I went to school after I bought the house, and now my income is here. But I want to sell it, and I want to sell it because I want to buy something in a different community. I'm moving to LA. It seems to me like in perpetuity is incredibly open, and it's never an end to it, and that I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good for the homeowner. I don't think it's maybe it's good for the next person who's going to buy it. I get that, and we also want to keep that affordability. But is that the right way to do it, though? So I question that.
I would say you asked previously, is this the right time to talk about it? And I would say respectfully, no. We listed as an out-of-scope item that we were committed in this process to keep that in perpetuity. So from that standpoint, there's nothing wrong with phrasing the question, but we sort of stipulated that as a piece that we were going to maintain. But an important data point is, I believe the number of for sale affordable units at this point in the that are available are 0, and we're just having our first one coming up. So we don't have any data as to the struggles or the successes. And moving forward with our annual reports and I think more tracking, we want to be able to make changes so that if there are problems, either for the potential homeowner, for a current homeowner, we want to address it, because the point is to assist people in their having attainable housing. And if it's not achieving that, then the program isn't working, and we need to find ways to address it.
Yeah, I was here for 2 of your meetings, and on the last one I had to leave. Unfortunately, it was very late. I left past 9 o'clock significantly, and I had to pick up my wife, or she would have been waiting outside on the street, on a dark street. So I had to leave, and I was not able to have the discussion. But I would think that if this is not the right forum to discuss these things, then what are we doing here? And I think that it should be allowed to be discussed here, because I think it's pertinent to do it. And if we're waiting to make errors to rectify them in the future, then I think that that's a little short-sighted, wouldn't you?
Well, I think the goal is to, my understanding of the charge from council to increase the requirements is specifically on the percentage side, but it's overall, it's looking at ways to increase affordability and attainability over the long run. And so that would be, if we made that number smaller, that would be increasing the amount of properties that would flip into being market rate. And currently we have the rental side are 30 years. And one of the things we looked at in this process was, can we increase that to more than 30 to reduce the amount of time it takes for it to potentially move out of the program and increase the length of the affordability. Based on our discussions with developers and calculating the changes we were making, we felt like the right balance right now wasn't to do that, and was to do other types of increases that were achieving our goals. But in general, at least the charges, I understand it, was to, if anything, raise the number from the rental side and not reduce the number from the homeownership side, so that all the periods are equal to or longer moving forward.
And the council, council, for a number of years now has been very supportive of community land trust, that whole approach of permanent making a property permanently affordable. And so having it be part of our IHO ordinance is very consistent with what we've been supporting in the community as a whole.
Okay, so I just would like to make a last comment to this ordinance then, and it is that I think that one factor that is not talked about is the cost. There is going to be a significantly higher cost to a developer to build. And it's great to have affordable housing in Evanston. I love it. I think it's very good for our community to maintain the diversity that we have at all levels, and this is one of them. But the cost is going to come, and it's going to be paid by somebody. If it costs me pre-COVID to bring kitchen cabinets from China for $30 a box, but post-COVID, issues with supply, materials, and cost of fuel, whatever, now I'm paying $120. Somebody's got to pay that difference, those $90 more. And it's obviously we're protecting the ones that are taking the advantage of the affordable housing. That is very good. But somebody's going to have to come and pay the piper. We're giving discounts to developers on taxes. Somebody's going to have to pay it. And basically, it's going to be the rest of Evanston carrying that burden again on our taxes. We have a deficit of, as far as I saw on the proposed budget that we received as public, as members of the public here, that we have a deficit of $52 million on our budget. On our $340 million budget, we only account for $290 million in revenue. So where's the other money coming from? Somebody's going to have to pay the piper, and it's going to be us. So we have to take all of these things into consideration. There's going to be a 5%, 10% more of affordable housing given by a developer. So that is going to be paid by somebody. And it's going to be the tenant of the other units that is going to have to pay a higher rent price. And that is only going to have a ripple effect on down to all of the other buildings in the area. Because if you're charging $3,800 and I've been charging $25, I'm going to increase my rent till I catch up with you, because now you're the standard. So that's what we are facing with this. And I think that, good, we can pass this on to council for their discussions and stuff like that, and they have the right to say no and yada, yada, all of that we heard before. But the problem is that I think that there are consequences to all of this that are not talked about. So that's my comment, and no question on that.
Okay, Councilmember Burns.
One of the questions I have is understanding the new kind of Cook County tax incentive, which I think is 20%. If 20% of the units are affordable, you're eligible for that.
So there are three tiers. One's 15%, one's 20%, and one's 35%.
Okay.
The one that we've heard and seen more, much more interest from developers for new construction in particular is the 20% one, which is why we've been talking more about that. But the other 15 and 35 are there as well. And again, we can't speak to what other properties are doing, but I believe like Tapestry, which we were discussing before, that has additional units, I believe the total amount they have might be 15, and they're taking advantage of the different tier. And so there are three options.
And is the way this would work is that our 15, that the 15 through this program would have to be on top of what they may receive from Cook County from being in that program?
No, so if our program didn't exist and someone did 20%, they would do it all themselves. And like Amy was saying before, the tenant outreach and everything would take place on their own, however they handle that. Currently, because of our requirements, 10% now, 15% if this proposed ordinance move forward and is approved, would be the amount that has to be in the Evanston IHO program, and then the difference would be the amount that they would do on their own. As Marion said earlier, if they proposed it for public benefit, it could all be in the IHO program. It's sort of up to them how they choose to do that and how they position it. It could be possible that developers aren't sure when they come for approval here if they're going to do that or not, so they're anchoring towards 15 and they decide to do 20. But that's sort of they're inclusive. They're not additive. The state or the county sees our units as qualifying in addition to the other ones, and so they could add more, but that would be their own prerogative.
Okay. And the other ones you're talking about is if we approve this, it would be the 5%, like 15% through this program. It would be 5% if they wanted to get to the 20%. But as far as Cook County would see it, it's all the same 20% for us. We would manage 15 of that 20 through this kind of IHO program. Is that the way to think about it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, so with that in mind, do we know what the requirements are for Cook County? Is it 60% AMI or below, or what are the guidelines?
So that's part of the conversations we've been having with the assessor's office. They have a lot of materials out, but it's a newer implementation of a state law on the county level. There was an amendment about a year ago that modified it, and so they're like they've only had a couple years, I think, where the materials have been out, and they're very clearly updating them and not just sort of rinse and repeating and sticking a 4 instead of a 3 for 2023, 2024. So we're working with them to figure out what that is, at the same time with the understanding that, again, we're not responsible for those units, but we're interested because if there's more affordable units in the city, that aligns with city council goals, and we want to be aware and able to collaborate, and especially not have the ordinance get in any way of what's going on. So for one example of that is the ordinance stipulates that all developments have to have weighted averages. They can supply all 60%, but the weighted average is still 60%. And the reason for that language is if we don't state that, there are negative implications for them taking advantage of the tax credits at the county level, and we don't need to get in the way of that. And especially if developers are interested in doing 20, and we can help facilitate that by adding that into the ordinance.
Do we have a local preference? I can't remember on our IHO ordinances.
Yes.
Because basically why I'm asking this kind of series of questions is trying to understand it seems like the benefit of having our own, to say 50%, 10%, whatever it is that we can kind of directly manage those units. But outside of that, unless I'm missing something, most developers are just going to do the 20% anyway. And so I'm just trying to understand, like, are we too low because of that? Because this is lower than what all of them are probably going to do on their own, because now they can take advantage of the Cook County incentive. So my first thought was like, is this too low because of that? Or is it not really relevant anymore, except for the fact that we get to directly manage 15% of the 20% and have the local preference and everything else that comes with it?
Right. Okay. If I, again, like for Ugo, if I don't answer all of them, tell me which one I missed. So one key distinction is that the county doesn't require 20%. The county allows you, if you do 20%, you could take advantage of it. So we don't know what would play out given market dynamics or future development scenarios. But if we got rid of our IHO, it's possible that developers say we're going to do 0 and we'll build 100% market rate. The 20% tax benefit isn't necessarily worth it. We don't want to have inclusionary housing units. That's their preference. Once we require 10%.
But do you think any amount, basically? Because I definitely think we should have it in place. Mm-hmm. But with the new Cook County rule, are we at a point where whether it's 10%, 15%, in most cases, it's probably going to make sense for the developer to do the 20?
So I'm not I'm not sure that math is, it's
I
like
know that's
doing
a big
the
question.
yeah,
but I'm
running
just-
the pro forma.
I'm just curious. Yeah.
I think I understand that the closer we get to 20, the more our program and the Cook County program end up being overlapping, or almost. If we made ours 20, then their program, everyone who participated at the 20% level would be also participating fully in our program, right? So that
Which might be a good thing.
That is an
And
option.
and that's what I'm trying to figure out is like, how can we most effectively and strategically use that percentage, keeping
Right.
in mind the 20% through Cook County? That's
Right.
exactly what I'm trying
Understood.
to. And what you just said, I hadn't even thought about that, but that's the type of,
Yes.
thinking that I'm trying to encourage, because maybe it is too low for that reason. So it's not necessarily something we need to figure out today. We could pick up on that at council, but that's
Right.
what I'm getting at.
So a couple of thoughts on that in terms of like sort of how we got to where we were, but those are parts of the conversation. One is the lowest tier is 15%. So by going lower than 15, then there's still that extra that developers could use. If we go above 15, then we are requiring more than that tier. And if the math doesn't work out in terms of development, then we're basically I think we talked about it the first time, the trick is hitting that bell curve where if we ask for too little, we get too little. If we require too little, we get too little. And if we require too much, we get too little. Because then no development happens if, let's say, we require 100% affordable for every project. So
Right.
where's that mark where we're getting the most, and it's threading the needle, and this program adds an extra twist to
I think the
to
fact
that
that we're hearing
analysis.
from people that 20%, that on their own developers are saying we're probably going to go for the 20%, is worth considering whether or not we should be at 20% as well. And now we're
Understood.
managing,
Sure.
directly managing all those units.
Understood.
So just a thought.
Yep.
Okay. Check my notes. The weighted AMI, has that, so I'm glad you mentioned a moment ago that part of that is trying to support developers who are interested in taking advantage of it. So that was helpful, because my question was if that's just, I think in our notes under the rationale, it points more to encouraging, incentivizing lower AMIs, I think it is. And so do we have an example of that has that? Are there other municipalities that have inclusionary housing ordinances and they're weighted in this way and it's been successful? They've been successful at encouraging lower AMIs, or is that just something where are we speculating a bit?
So the city of Chicago actually advocated for that to be added to the state law, and that was the amendment, because their ARO, which went into effect in 2021, I believe, requires weighted averaging, and that's where they had some trickiness where there wasn't a requirement for weighted averaging, was not allowed, and so they were going to be requiring something that wouldn't align with the incentives, and then the amendment, the way it's worded, states that you have to require it like Chicago did. So therefore, we need to require to mimic that in order to take advantage of it.
And so does it have, is this being recommended more because of that and less because we think it's going to incentivize lower AMIs?
Well, it's definitely both.
Okay.
It provides flexibility for the developer, which is one key thing we were trying to provide was predictability for the developer and the community, but flexibility within all the parameters that were positive outcomes for the community. Yes, it's both of those things. I will say also that with the interest in the Cook County property tax, if developers are aiming to get 20%, there are a couple of reasons why they might not go with a couple of the options that we selected, not necessarily the weighted average, but if you remember on the sheet, if you go to 12%, You reduce the requirements to 12%, but then the weighted average is lower.
That's actually my next question. So,
Okay. So
feel
if-
free to flow into
Yeah,
that
I'll
next,
flow into
'cause
that.
I didn't
So if-
really understand what you meant.
So then let me
what that means.
explain what that is, and then I can go to that. So
Yeah.
the proposed setup is raising the minimum requirement to 15% and 60% AMI. The one change is it's weighted. So instead of only being 60, you can do 40 and 80, 50 and 70. As a reminder, it is capped at 80. So it wouldn't be, 20
any
and
higher than
100.
80. Yeah.
That wouldn't fit in. As an alternative to encourage even lower AMIs, instead of doing 15% of your units, so we'll do 100 unit development, 15 units that are weighted at 60% AMI, you could do 12 units that are weighted at 50% or 10 units that are weighted at 40%, with that understanding that the developer is receiving lower rents for the units that are lower AMIs, and the community and the tenants are receiving housing at AMIs that they wouldn't have otherwise because of those. So that's basically how that works, and it's treated as an equal option where a developer could just select what it was. It wouldn't be
You can provide less units overall under that if
yes,
you do low.
fewer
okay.
units for lower AMIs is the
Okay.
same thing as fewer units if they're larger units.
Okay.
Those are both built in. The piece on the property tax was just if a developer is set on getting the 20%, providing 20%, and we're giving them an opportunity to provide fewer units at lower AMIs, that doesn't help them get to 20%. They still need 20%.
Right.
So it's possible, given the current Cook County tax incentive setup, that developers won't opt for that as much
take
as
advantage of that,
as
yeah.
we would like necessarily. But ideally, the way we have it set up is that all options are options that the community, the council wants to see, and the developers can pick the one that they want, and that they're all furthering the goals. The current tax incentive, I believe, is set to sunset in 2027. That doesn't mean that if anybody applies now, they get it for the whole time that they would. It's unclear if it will be renewed.
That's interesting. So right now you have to apply before 2027.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's
So we're gonna see a
developments
lot
that are
of
happening in the
interest.
next few years.
We're going to see a lot of people trying to develop right now.
Right.
That's good.
And that's why we're going to do these annual updates so that we can look at this and see,
Yeah.
is something changing? Do we find out that they're renewing the legislation, and that means we should continue anchoring towards this? It's long enough right now that that's a 3 full year. I think it's the end of 2027. So it's 3 full years. We tend to update the ordinance every 3 years. So we feel confident that that's, something that we should align with.
2 more quick questions. So one, are we concerned that we're going to that we might lose 60% AMI units? And if so, I want us to acknowledge that at some point so that we know where we're going to make those up, because it's possible that, that's serving, a large part of our community. And if we start to lose those units, it's just important that we know where we're replacing them. And maybe it's in other developments that occur throughout the city, but I just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, I think outside of the units reaching their 30, if they're rental units reaching their 30-year time frame, we would be maintaining the number of 60% AMI units we have and just adding additional units that were at different AMIs. So
Yeah.
Overall, it would be equal or more, but it may not be the increase someone might have anticipated if they were assuming 60%.
Yeah.
And I think that just falls into it's a good point, and it falls under the IHO is one tool in our
Right.
toolkit. And if we keep that in mind, then we can figure out how can we address that in some
Exactly,
of the
yeah.
other ways that we're working on housing issues.
Because if the tool starts to work better for a certain AMI than another, then we should be aware of that so we know what's making it up, if it's an issue. Because I think when people hear all these AMIs, they think it's like somewhat interchangeable. But no, it's somebody, if it's 70% AMI, somebody that's making 60 is not going to be eligible for those units. And we may have a lot of people who are at 60% AMI and that may not be, and we may not be developing as many new 60% AMI units under this proposal potentially.
I need to interrupt us a minute, because we need to vote while we still have a quorum.
Oh, he's putting on his hat.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's it. I'll leave it at that. I'll ask the
Can
rest
we,
of my
can
questions at
we,
council.
could we take a vote and then still have a few more questions for Uri?
I think it's up to the committee. The hope is to have a vote. Obviously, if the committee is not in a spot where they feel
Right.
comfortable
Well,
voting.
I'm hopeful that the committee is ready to actually vote on this, but then for further education, we could ask questions. Like, Chloe, you're the only one who had a question that I haven't had a chance to call on yet.
Yeah, I mean, we can vote and then I can ask
Okay,
it later.
right, yeah, okay. So we've had a motion to recommend to city council that the council repeal the current IHO and replace it with the one we're discussing. So could we have a roll call?
Chair Revelle,
Aye?
Chloe Thurston,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
No.
Councilmember Burns, Councilmember Heracars.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
Okay, great, thank you.
May I?
Sure.
I just wanted to add something to your question about Councilmember Burns. When it comes to the AMI and the lower AMI units, I think it's a good point of data is to look at the report we were just looking at with the IHO waitlist, because we were mentioning we have a good band of that waitlist that's in the 30-50% AMI. I, on a personal level, would love to see some 50% AMI units at some point. We have mostly 60% AMI. Seeing a little bit of diversity would help us address the need of the people that are in that band on the wait list.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just want to make sure that, because again, it's just, if we're going to use the tool differently, which is not a good or bad thing, it just is just knowing how we're going to how other tools could help serve that AMI that used to be served through this tool, but now we're trying to use it differently to address lower AMI, which I think is an important thing to do. I did also just want to quickly say the land trust program is a well-defined program that has been facilitated mostly through community partners for affordable housing for a very long time. Maybe there's land trust programs that we intend to manage ourselves, but I think in most cases we end up working with CPAH. And so to your point, I think Ugo's point, while it may seem like those questions are unanswered here today, if Rob Anthony was here, executive director of CPAH, he would be able to answer all of those questions without an issue, because they've done this program successfully for many years now. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that the land trust program is well defined, well known. It's not about building a bunch of equity up, because building a bunch of equity up is selling your home for a lot more than you purchased it for, is conflicts with affordability, right? If I sell my home for $400,000 or $500,000, that's not affordable. It may be great for your family, and allow you to purchase other property or relocate. But in terms of affordability, we know that that doesn't work. And so the whole point of any kind of subsidy or affordable program is to try to control those, the costs as much as you can, so that the next person can benefit from what you benefited from. And in the case of the land trust program, it's like you're buying a home that's priced much lower than you otherwise would have. So that's one benefit, because CPAH or whoever owns the land trust, operates the land trust, owns the land. You're not paying as much in taxes, property taxes, because of that. So you're receiving all of these benefits from being in the program. And the way it works is you pay it forward to the next person. And it creates, housing affordability, stability, et cetera. And then maybe the little bit of equity that you are able to get from it, then you buy another home using that once your income raises or you get into a better position. So I just I think it would be helpful at council to have Rob Anthony attend the meeting so that he can respond to some of those questions.
Yep. Thanks. Chloe?
I was wondering, when was the tax incentive introduced?
I believe it passed in 2021, and then each county needed to work to facilitate that on the county level, because it's a state law that's implemented on the county level. So I'm not positive if it was available in 2022 or they were still working on it, and last year was the first year, I think.
You're right. Based on the conversation we had with Cook County, they had very few application in Evanston. They're going to send us the data, but it's still a very, very new program. So they're just seeing a couple buildings. I think they had like two applications that were approved, and maybe we're working on one or two more. So it's still very, very new.
Okay, and it sunsets so I guess I'm wondering how much the sort of interest among developers in reaching 20% is just driven entirely, I mean, it's driven almost entirely by the tax incentive, right? So if the tax incentive goes away, are they going to be interested in the 15% of the, will it sort of pencil out, I guess, in the same way for developers, or is there a risk there of the tax incentive sunsetting and our new higher sort of IHO not working to incentivize affordable housing? This is a question. Like I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
I hear you. It's a good question that I don't have an answer to. I think that from our understanding of the current landscape, that seems to be, at least on the tax incentive part, from a positive perspective, stable for the next few years, even if it may not continue after that. There is high interest on the 20%, which makes it, our 15% seem to work, be palatable. We've received positive input from developers. That could change if the property tax incentive goes away or reduces. But there are also so many other market dynamics that I wouldn't want to isolate just that, because interest rates and zoning changes and cost of labor and all those pieces are other factors that will change how projects pencil out.
Great. And you said, so I thought it was great that you included the summary from all of the different sort of stakeholders that you engaged in this. And you mentioned in here, like, about half of the developers are concerned about the impacts on smaller developers and developments, and then that moving from sort of 5 to 7, or sort of the minimum units moving from 5 to 7 is a way to encourage smaller developments or smaller developers. And so did that address, was the concern raised after that was offered, or did that address the concern that was raised?
It was,
or is that not even actually the concern that they were?
No,
so they're a separate set of concerns.
Right. Well, the concerns were generally more general than like the specific pieces of the ordinance, but was if increases take place from 10 to 15%, either hearing from small developers directly that they were concerned themselves, or from mid to larger size developers, we can probably handle that, but I'm not sure about a smaller one, was sort of the dynamic. Not necessarily in a specific area of the, not necessarily suggesting a specific way to resolve it, but just recognizing that that was the case. So one way that we addressed it was moving from 5 to 7 so that 5 and 6 units are exempt. We also have what the current ordinance is, the way it's calculated. I don't think I have the spreadsheet graph here, but if you map out the cost and the unit requirement per unit over the course of like it's nothing down there, but from 5 up, it's like the highest at 5, the way the calculation works. So that's, not only is it a lot for a small developer, but percentage wise, it is the most for a smaller developer. So we recalculated, if you see in the ordinance, below 15 units, the calculation's slightly different. And it's generally, I think at 10 units, it's 15%, but otherwise it's sort of a ramp up where it's between 10 and 15% to try to accommodate that piece. So that was one attempt to accommodate smaller developers and smaller developments. There was a public comment from a smaller developer who commented that sounded like a promising way to deal with that. I can't speak on behalf of the development community at large.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's also harder to do outreach to smaller developers who have less of a capacity in terms of staff or those types of things. So, but we're hoping that that's a move in the right direction, and we want to track so that we can see, are there developments that are proposed that it's not just developments that go through, but are developments proposed and then stop because they're hitting a barrier, and is that barrier something with the IHO, or is it something that the IHO can relieve even if it's somewhere else?
And this is just a question, this is a comment, not a question, and maybe it goes a bit to Ugo's concern too. So, I think this should be discussed and it should be sort of, brought to council as is. But I do kind of wonder about the sort of, because I was surprised by how supportive the developers that you talked to and, the community, everyone seems pretty supportive of this, which is really good. And it's great to hear about all of this 20% sort of, people are doing this already anyways. But if it's tied to the current tax incentive and the current market dynamics, then there's a question about whether we're creating something that's sort of too rigidly sort of assuming that. And I guess it's more of an open, or like a comment or a sort of something that I'm kind of pondering, that I don't have an answer to myself, and I'm not, but I feel like I should say that, since it seems like a relevant thing for other people to discuss who have decision-making power out here.
Okay, yeah, Ugo.
Thank you. Just a comment to what Chloe just referred to, and it is the fact that we hear of the developers that say they agree to the change, but we really don't have any data on all the developers that are saying, no, I won't do anything, and I was done with these requirements. So it's pretty selective, the number of developers or the names of developers that we have. I can't even imagine that you didn't encounter anyone who said, no way, Jose, I'm not going there. I'm sure there are plenty. I talked to many that have been talking about even pulling out of here because of our new requirements. So that's just a comment to that. But I have a question that has been bothering me. How do you calculate 10% of 7 units?
0.7.
Where do you want the 0.7 unit? If I have 7 units, so I make one smaller?
So the ordinance so currently we have rules around fractions and how to apply it. It is a little complicated, but the proposed ordinance, do you mind if I do one that's a little bit larger just so that there's a whole number and a fraction?
Sure.
Okay. So if the calculation ends up being, let's say, 3.7 units, the developer has 3 options. They can provide 4 units, so the amount rounded up. They could provide no units, and they could provide the in lieu fee times 3.7 based on the units, because the in lieu fees are based on the unit size. So let's just say they're all 1 bedrooms, 3.7 times the 1 bedroom fee. That would be the payment, or any amount between 0 and 3.7. And pay us the difference in the in lieu fee. So 3, because no one's going to provide we don't count quasi units. So can provide 1 unit and pay 2.7. Can provide 2 units and pay the 1.7. So the fraction ends up being either rounded up or paid in an in lieu fee. That's up to the developer.
That makes sense. And I was going to make a comment also of the in lieu fee. I think that there shouldn't be one. Should be a mandate to turn the units that are required, and if there is a difference of the decimal unit that could be paid, calculated at whatever way it is. So if it's 3.7 units, bill 3 or bill the 4 if that's what you like, or pay the 0.7 of the unit that you're missing. So not the in lieu fee, because I think that bigger developers can afford to pay the in lieu fee, and they're going to charge for their units that are either for rent or for sale to compensate for that. but smaller developers can't. So they are stuck with this. So that's my thought on the in lieu fee.
So I think we're wrapping this up. Whoops.
Follow up
Okay.
on that. And that's why, at least with this proposal, the in lieu of fee is closer to what it would cost to build another like unit, right? Isn't that?
So the
way it was considered?
the calculation is based off of the estimated lost revenue from the developer on the difference, not on the. We initially had talked about a construction cost, and in more talks with policy experts, that is one way to calculate it, but it can be disconnected from the cost to the developer, and that's the cost that's driving their decisions.
Right.
But it is depending on the size of the unit, a little bit more or substantially more than what we were charging before, with the idea that that is disincentivizing developers to pay the in lieu fee and to provide the units, which is the point of the ordinance. And if they don't, then the dollar amounts that we have can much better either pay for offsite units or provide meaningful funding for other types of housing projects or initiatives. Everything going into the Affordable Housing Fund is limited to that.
I just wanted to point that out, that if it is significantly higher, closer to what a unit costs to build, whether it's there or somewhere else, like we'll have the funding to develop another unit, affordable unit somewhere else, hopefully. And then also just wanted to point out that I think in most cities in America or anywhere, you have developers that don't like developing in certain areas. So to me, that's not really the consideration, is how many people we can find that don't want to develop here. The question is, do we have enough developers who want to do business in the city of Evanston who can provide the amount of units that we need? And I think that's to be determined. But I think it's important to just set the expectation. The goal is not to have 100%. If you were to survey 100% developers, all of them want to do business in the city. I don't think that's achievable. The question is, do we have enough? And I think we'll have to find it out. Yeah. And I think to your question, hopefully we can revisit, knowing that this 20%. Right now, the IHO is if we were to pass it now, it's scheduled to be revisited. How often again? I can't remember the schedule. How many? So
the plan would for staff to come back with a report on an annual basis.
Okay.
In the past, the setup was each ordinance was different, but in general, it was 3 years from then come back to review and update the ordinance. And the current setup is, let's look at it a little bit more frequently. Let's track it a little bit better. And if we need to update it after 1 year, maybe it's a minor change. It's a much faster process. Maybe there's no reason to update it. We should look at it sooner than 3 years. And there's nothing magical about 3 years. If COVID-24 or whatever happens, which would be horrible. But if something that shocks the system, we can't wait 3 years.
Right,
we need to revisit and make sure that it's aligned with the market and the goals of the council.
So I just wanted to point that out. Yeah, for you that hopefully the way this probably is going to work is before the Cook County program is terminated, that we'll have another chance to revisit this and decide if we need to make any adjustments.
If we're on the same schedule that we're at now, we would be looking at another ordinance. By then, we would already have. I don't know when we would start the annual report. We probably want to think strategically about when CPAH does their reports and when other projects are coming online, the development cycle. But I'm assuming we would have one in 2025, 2026. We would have 3 reports by then as well.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
So just a couple of quick comments. I was interested in the packet, the chart that showed compared, looked at a whole bunch of other municipalities around the country, and almost none of them have a required. I'm losing my word. A minute, whatever we're talking about. It's too late. Just as we are going to get rid of. I'm sorry, I'm really blanking on it.
let me take a stab. Do you mean we're moving away from having an on-site requirement
That's the
and
one.
allowing
That's the
the
word.
developer
There
to.
we go. That's
A lot of
yeah.
places don't have that either.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. I was very surprised about that. I appreciate the fact that you did talk to a lot of different developers and people engaged in this whole business, and so I feel comfortable that we have heard from a good number of people that we needed to hear from. I have one more thing to say. Anyway, we will look forward to well, I guess we'll look forward to discussion at council, but also an update in a year's time. So we have one more item, is the HUD 2025-2029 Consolidated Plan, which is just an update about where we are with that.
Yes. This should be fairly quick. I know it's late, and I always catch you very late in the meeting.
Right.
So I'll try to make it quick. I just wanted, the next meeting is when we're providing the full draft of the consolidated plan. So I wanted to give you a quick update as to the general direction we're heading, to give you an opportunity to provide some feedback based on what we talked about last month. So this is the same slide we had last month's, time flies. Around the purpose of the consolidated plan. Again, we're talking about a 5-year plan, HUD grant funding, and setting answers to a very structured plan with questions that are set out by HUD. And at the same time, it gave us an opportunity to kind of reset goals for funding. The budget assumption we're working with is about 1.375 million for CDBG, which is quite a drop, and that would be annually over 5 years, but that's what we're going to use for assumption. And for home, we're looking at $275,000 and no ESG. So for the last comp plan, we had about 2.286 million per year. We're now at 1.65, so obviously it's a big drop. We had to find ways to reassess where we're going to put funding based on some of the information we found and the surveys that we did, and other funds available. We talked about at the last meeting the outreach that we did, the data that we reviewed, the survey that we did. Quick reminder that we're talking here about the eligible population, which is 0 to 80% AMI households in Evanston, which is about 11,000 households in Evanston. I think it's important sometimes to kind of put a scale of the number of people we're talking about. It's a lot. With about 2/3 being renters. And we've got the majority of those households being housing cost burden, close to 70% for renters. One new piece of information that came from the survey. The survey asked potential eligible population, so income eligible households, kind of prioritization or what was really important to them when it came to the kind of buckets we can use, particularly CDBG and home for. One of the findings that we've got from the survey was that, generally speaking, for when it comes to infrastructure and public facilities buckets, there's high interest for parks improvements, for access to public transportation, for drainage projects, which could potentially include alleys, because that is a benefit of that. Less interest for anything related to biking. So I thought that was something that we can keep in mind when we're looking at allocating the funding that is going to be quite reduced for public facilities. Okay. Quick reminder on housing program. This is the same slide you saw last time. That essentially what the survey brought up is that while there's interest for any and all housing program, there's less interest for home ownership and home ownership assistance program than for other programs, which is something we used as we looked at how to propose funding allocation. I talked last month about how we were going to look at other funding that's available that kind of pertains to the kind of decision you're going to be making. So I've got here about 3 different buckets of programs that use usually general funding or other federal funding, but essentially non-HUD grant funding, that are programs that are relevant. So the first bucket is essentially emergency housing assistance program. There's about $600,000 that's assigned to general programs such as general assistance, emergency assistance, community member relief, and other programs listed here that are assigned for those purposes. When it comes to housing program and income programs, there's about $2 million that's currently allocated between the guaranteed income program, which we generally, it's not a housing program, and we count it under this bucket because we've seen studies that show that the vast majority of people that receive those funds tend to use it for housing. And then including the affordable housing subsidy and refugee housing that's currently funded with ARPA. We also have a general bucket under kind of affordable housing supply and creation that includes putting assets to work program, the inclusionary housing program, and the kind of project that would be funded through the Affordable Housing Fund. And so this bucket would usually include a good chunk of donations, but also funding of about approximately $3 million that's currently existing, or that is set to be received by the city, such as Northwestern's dollars, as an example. And then we have a bunch of program around housing rehabilitation, and that's approximately $1.5 million. That includes the Love Your Block program, the Handyman program, which currently doesn't have specific funding assigned, but could be approved to get funding from the Affordable Housing Fund. It has in the past. It's just currently paused. The Green Homes program that you heard about today, and the Accessible Solar program as well, that's part of that. There's other programs that could be coming through other type of grants that I didn't include here because they're less defined currently, and I don't want to muddy the water. But that at least gives you an understanding of other programs that would be addressing the need that we're talking about through the comp plan that exists in the city. So when it comes to draft allocation, generally speaking, here is the direction that our team is going with. We, having reviewed all the data that we've seen and heard from the survey, and knowing that we have a cut in funding, we're looking to keep or increase allocation for anything that's housing activities. We're looking to make sure that particularly activities that are supporting tenants are included in the plan. And where we're looking at making potential cuts is code enforcement, because there's potential for those funds to be carried through the general fund, as well as through the new system of inspection fees or rental registration to be able to keep the program but not necessarily use CDBG funds for it. A good chunk of the cuts that I'm suggesting would be infrastructure and public facilities. In the past, we had a really good chunk of the funds that were allocated to alley paving, sidewalks, parks, as well as nonprofit public facilities improvement. We're suggesting to keep some of it because we have to keep some, and actually I'm going to change the slide just so you have a better picture, because that gives you a general numbers associated to what I'm talking about as far as goals and actual dollars. So we're suggesting more cuts for the Creating Livable Communities, which is the public facilities and infrastructure. We're suggesting to keep some because we need some. There's a need. But also it provides some stability to the program as far as risk management and grant management to make sure we can make timeliness and make sure we can keep getting our funding. It addressed some of the needs that the population in the survey have shared was important to them. But we're suggesting to reduce it to make sure that we're focusing on housing activities. Housing rehab is one of the examples where we're keeping the funding and actually layering more than usual and addressing multifamily and rental housing rehab, which is something we weren't doing as much in the last comp plan, to make sure our tenants' needs are addressed through this funding. The second item that we have is a major change would be how we use public services. So we're not considering changing the public services allocation. It's kind of the same. It's capped at the max of 15%, the same it's been. What we are suggesting is that instead of the public services allocation being for our current programs, which is case management, safety net, and supportive services managed by SSC, we're suggesting keeping the public services bucket, but using it for housing services, to follow kind of city council goals around affordability and affordable housing, and provide some opportunity to at some point have an emergency rental program, which is also one of the city council goal that was requested, was to find a new source of funding. So this essentially doesn't necessarily finalize the exact housing services that would fall under this bucket, because it's going to be a little bit of a transition. So there might be a year where we continue supporting the shelter or other items, but it helps us provide us with different avenues and how to spend this funding and answer to the need that we're seeing in the community. And particularly, this is one thing we've considered as part of losing ESG funding. This is the only way we can use grant funding for rental assistance. If we want to do at any point during the next 5 years rental assistance, we have to use public services. What else? Tenant-based rental assistance is funded with home, and we're keeping it steady as much as we can, which allows us to keep going with the rental assistance program and supporting renters, which essentially means that we have a little bit less funding for bricks and sticks affordable housing program. Mostly this chart here means that we would expect we would have maybe one project that would be able to be funded over the next 5 years. A smaller project around $400,000. Home is not a lot of money, and it's very cumbersome with compliance when it comes to affordable housing. So we believe using the majority of it for tenant-based rental assistance is probably our best bang for the buck when it comes to home. Any general question? Obviously, I will be coming back next month with more detail, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity to provide any feedback.
I wasn't able to review this item. So along with this information, do we have, did the packet provide information about the different buckets, the ways that we can spend CDBG funding? I know we discussed that. I can't remember.
That was the last meeting. So we went over
Did
that
I
at the
miss
last
that?
meeting.
Okay.
Yes, I can provide that.
Yeah, if you can, I
to
don't know.
you.
That would be great. Yeah.
We went over at the last meeting all the different buckets. There wasn't a ton of new categories that we could, but I did cover some of the Section 108 loan, and we've actually doing some research. One of the key direction, based on where we are as a city and kind of the multiple sources of funding that are coming through, particularly with the Affordable Housing Fund, the Pro Housing Grant application, things like that, we're kind of at a hinge point where we're looking to maybe focus the HUD grant funds on non-acquisition, non-supply, more rental assistance, housing rehab, code enforcement kind of activities, and really focus more of the kind of acquisition, supply, creation of affordable housing with the more flexible funding that we currently have. There could be a potential to use CDBG in the future for Section 108 loans for 5 times the amount of the annual grant funding. I started joining trainings around this to learn more about the programs. It's something we could consider if the need arose once we have a little bit more information about where we're going with the current funds that we have. We could potentially do, as an example, a substantial amendment to the Consolidated Plan. I wouldn't recommend it right now based on where we are, particularly because it's a very, very cumbersome program. It likely would require specific dedicated staff for only, I mean, it's a lot of money, but only $5 million, which does not necessarily go very far for the kind of things we'd want to do.
Right.
So that is something that I would suggest we continue exploring as an option, but not commit to at this instant.
At the last meeting, did that packet go over just all the different
Yeah,
ways we
I
can
will
spend
send
funding
that
as a refresher?
over again.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good. So I'll look at that. And then the other thing is we were able to, I think, setting aside at least some money to continue to do park improvement is important within the CDBG area. I missed the discussion at Finance and Budget Committee about this, about park improvement. But I like the fact that we were able to use CDBG. We set aside some money to improve the play equipment at Twigs Park. You know, if we use that money, we don't have to bond out and, pay the expense to do that. And to at least try to do that within the CDBG area. I see a benefit of at least trying to do that, continue doing that maybe one a year in the same way that we kind of focused on alleys to maybe for the next few years, focus on improving parks using CDBG funds within the CDBG area. I don't know. Maybe that's just Twiggs Park. I need to look at the map again to see if there are others.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
So clearly from the data, what we're seeing is that the residents in eligible household are interested in that. And
Yeah.
that's something I would want to favor if the Public Works team comes with an application for a park. I will say we have the $450,000 that's currently allocated to the two different park improvement for Twiggs Park. It's becoming harder and harder to find eligible, qualifiable parks within the area and getting the requirements met for HUD as far as parks. But
Okay.
it's definitely something that I'm keeping in mind because clearly the data is showing that's one of the main, the top improvement that the residents are looking to see.
Okay. Cool. That's all. Thank you.
All right, well, we look forward to another discussion about this next month.
Yeah, next month is a big meeting, so that's the first draft. That's a
Right.
big
Yeah. Okay.
milestone.
Is there any other staff report or update? That's it?
None for
Okay.
today.
Okay, well, we have two meetings scheduled for this committee next month in November. Thursday, November 7th at 6 p.m., we're going to be talking about our building inspections program. And then on Tuesday, November 19th at 7 p.m. is our regular HCDC meeting. So make sure everybody's got this on your calendar.
Yep. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, so I declare us adjourned.